All right, welcome back everyone to JFace Games. I am JFace, and we are creating a TTRPG. That's our goal. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through the character sheet and give you an idea of the character sheet for my TTRPG that I'm creating. And I apologize in advance. I've been having some issues with OBS Studios, and it stopped recording on me twice, so I'm a little paranoid right now. So let's hope that it doesn't... One of the times is it never started recording on me, and I went for 20 minutes. That was joyous. So now let's go ahead and get rolling. So what do we have here? This is the character sheet, and this is two sides of the character sheet. You have this landscape side, which is sort of your combat side. And then on the other side, you have, in essence, what's like the story side. It's your social role-playing side, and also sort of like some of your history of your character. Okay? And I like the idea of putting these two different sides on. Obviously, you can reference your story side at any time, but I like the idea of putting these on two different sides as different like modes of play, right? Mainly because I know that my games are a little bit more tactical combat heavy, and so having a whole side dedicated to that, where it's a playbook as opposed to a character sheet, more like that Forged in the Dark, which means that it can be much more like all the things you need are listed out, right? The other thing I'm excited about is that instead of saying roll for initiative, because roll for initiative is sort of ubiquitous with, oh, it's time to get down, there's no initiative system in this. The players go first. So now instead the DM could say something like flip your sheet, and then everyone just loses their shit as they're like, oh, and they flip their sheet and they're getting ready, they're getting in the mind frame for combat. So I like that idea. All right, so what we have over here is, in essence, these are the different type of things that I've already decided are going to go on this combat side, right? And so we're going to walk through them one at a time. So the tactical actions, what are those? Well, that's this little block here. And like I said, this is a playbook. So these are all the actions that are available for the player as a tactical action. Now, what's a tactical action? Well, you have, in essence, three things you're going to do on your turn. One of three things. You're going to attack, which is everyone just automatically gets an attack, and they're, for the most part, automatically going to hit. So it's just damage is accruing. You're always doing stuff. You can move. And then you can have a tactical action. Now, the tactical action is definitely a little bit inherited from like a bonus action, but also like it's a bonus action / reaction, and it's very much similar to the quick action in Vagabond, where it's the idea that you get to perform one of these on your turn or the enemy's turn or a friend's turn anytime. Between now and your next turn, you can use your tactical action. There's all sorts of different types. And there are team and solo ones. The only real reason these are split up is because different classes might be better at different actions, right? So like a cleric type, which we call voice in this, or the zealots, they might be very good at more team-oriented, or the tactician might be very good at a team-oriented one, whereas a rogue might be much more oriented, or a seeker might be much more oriented towards doing something solo. So this gives me a way to tap into these actions mechanically, somewhat, right? So that is the tactical action. So we'll go ahead and we'll click that one off. Boop. Nope. Oh, it. Oh. And we got it. Thanks. All right. Now your class, or your like powers. So that would take up this whole side. And I don't know if the dimension on this are 100% accurate, so we're just rolling with it. But in essence, this is your, what class are you, and then what are the subclasses, what are all the powers available. You would go through, you would click which one's your primary, you would then click the actual ones you have. The reason there's a primary next to it is because, yeah, you might be a tactician, but you might be able to dip into some of these Fury or Seeker abilities. And these are a bunch of abilities that I've created, but these are in no way finalized. I haven't play tested these yet, and I still have to make them for some of the other classes, so that they can be play tested in thoroughly. Also, I got to work on the, obviously, I'll need someone's help to actually finalize this character sheet, because I have no idea what I'm doing design-wise. Because in essence, we talked about this in the last video in terms of game design, I want this character sheet to be very intuitive and fun to engage in, right? So, what else do we have? We have the name, obviously. So your character is going to have a name. They're going to have a background and skills. And what are backgrounds and skills? Well, I think those are pretty self-explanatory. But in this game, what that kind of means is, right now, I'm just making the math super basic, right? So the basicness of the math, I believe we already talked about, where it's like a hard is like a 13, a DCs are like hard is a 13. This is just on a D20. Medium is like an 11, and in easy is an 8, right? And so that means the difference between 8 and a 13 is 5. So if you have a background in something, you get +2, right? So you just write whatever background it is. You're a noble, you're a urchin, whatever. And if you can say that, oh yeah, I'd be able to do that because of my background, guess what? You get a +2. If you also have a skill that you would use during that scenario, you get also a +3, right? So if you've got a background and a skill that both coincide with what you're trying to do, you got +5. If you've got just a skill, you get +3. If you've got just a background, you get +2. Simple, right? We're just trying to make it super simple math and super simple, quick and intuitive, right? So that would take over the name and skills and background. I'm also trying to think about how I might use these roles again. These roles being strike, control, shoot, lead, and defend. I still kind of like these as potentially your main attributes. And maybe some of these tactical actions, like if you're trying to maneuver an ally, you'd have to use a lead skill check to make it happen. Now, I'm trying to avoid a lot of skill checks. Like I think that if you use your tactical action to maneuver someone, you just do it. But I'm putting this in there to play around with the idea of potentially having it there, depending on if it feels too easy or I don't know. I don't know if it's too easy, but something to that effect, where like you're missing something, like the experience is missing something. So then we add that in. So I'm placing it in there because it's potential. Then we have armor class. Armor class should be pretty intuitive, right? Armor class is it's a damage reduction, and this is just showing you what type of armor you have and what type of reduction you would have. And then we have health. And health would go somewhere in here. I'm just throwing these in here. I have no idea where they'd go. Let's put it down here. Let's put this one up here. Right? Super simple. Then I'm going to put in loadouts. So where did I put that? Loadouts would be very similar to Forged in the Dark. And to be honest, now that I'm thinking about it, there's a good chance that if we have loadouts, that then this armor class is actually sort of like embedded in here, right? Or maybe, yeah, something like that. Because technically your loadout might be, oh, I'm bringing this loadout, which gives me X amount of equipment, or X equipment boxes and light armor and type of weapon, whatever. 1 melee, 1 ranged, and then something else gives you like 2 melee and 1 ranged, whatever. So this loadout might actually end up being down here and absorbing that, because depending on the class, you might have different types of loadouts available to you. Okay. What else do we have? That's all of them except for the last 2 big ones. So let's go ahead. I know I'm having a tough time clicking on these puppies. So default tactic. What is default tactic? Well, in the storytelling, we started talking about the idea of having a default tactic, which is instead of having something like fear and conditions, where you have these fears or conditions that force you to do things, right? Like if you get feared in a lot of games, it means you have to run, right? And you got to run away the other direction, or if you're, or you can't do anything, right? And that's not fun, right? It's not fun when you take away someone's agency completely. I also like the idea of conditions in Shadow Dark, where they do more like intuitive conditions, meaning if you're paralyzed, you should kind of table-wise, you should know what that means. Well, default tactic is this idea that maybe you have this default tactic that is cued into your character's nature, and maybe it's tied into your flaw in some way. And it's almost like the weakness cards in the Arkham Horror living card game decks that you would have, but in the weakness cards were just terrible. They're just bad. These tactics might not be that bad. They just might not be amazing. And they might not be what you're wanting to do at that moment, but depending on when something happens to you, instead of being able to use your tactical action to do something down here or use one of your powers, you have to use your default action, right? So that way it feels like it's still in line with your character. Like it makes it feel like oh, this is what my character would do in this scenario, because you've kind of built out that concept, right? So that's the idea of a default tactic. The last thing is your class-specific mechanic, which would go right in here. And so I just kind of made this just as a stand-in, but in essence, what you would have is that every different class, so this is the warrior class, would have some sort of little mini game here, We talked in the last, or in one of the videos, about games having toys that you play with. And this gives every class a little something to be able to play with as a toy. So imagine that you have, these are stances, right? For the warrior, right? So the warrior has stances, and let's make this a little nicer, right? And so warriors have stances, and maybe you've got a little token, and that token starts unbalanced, okay? Well, you as a character can choose, this is like +2 damage, minus 2 AC, right? And that's the aggressive stance. And then you have balanced, which is like nothing, and the defensive is maybe the opposite, right? -2 AC, or no, I'm sorry, +2 AC, -2 damage, right? Something like that. And then you'd have the tactician, which maybe is something a little different, where it's like +1 damage, +1 AC, whatever. But the tactician is only available to the tactician subclass. So now what happens is you have this concept where I've got a token sitting here, and at the beginning of my turn, I can only move it one direction, right? If I'm a tactician, I can go this way. But if I'm any other class, I have to move it up towards aggressive or defensive or keep it at balanced. But I only get to do it on my turn. And if I'm at defensive, I can't really go all the way to aggressive. Maybe I can, but it costs me something. Like, it costs me my tactical action as well to be able to do that, right? So now you've got this little mini game that the warrior is able to play, and it gives them a little extra strategy they can think about or consider when doing it. And if you're a tactician, you've got this other side one that you can kind of move within and out. And so I want to try and do this kind of thing with all the classes, where they all have this own little mini game, and the mini game should feel very different, right? So the warriors one is stances, and there's not really a resource here. It's just moving within those stances. And I think I would have like a fury specific one where it's like off of aggressive. You have another one up here where it's like rage, right? Something to that effect. And now you can only get to rage through aggressive, and getting back to defensive is impossible, right? So maybe that's a fury specific one, and then seeker would have something off of balanced off the other side, or it wouldn't be as tied, whereas tactician can move to anything, rage can only move back to aggressive, and then whatever the seeker one is would maybe move only between balanced, or I don't know, who knows. So that gives you an idea of what this side looks like. What you'll also notice is that here I have weapons, and you'll notice there's no weapons on this character sheet, and this is my main consideration. Either A, weapons is going to be part of loadout, and then maybe this is a reference telling you that light weapons do 2d4, 2d6, whatever. Or B, I'm considering this idea. We had a conversation on the Discord channel, which is in the links down below, and you should join it if you'd like to talk games. But we had a discussion of strategies and tactics at one point in time, and I thought that was a really fun discussion. So shout out to, I don't know if I pronounced it right, but Boke for that, initiating that discussion. But the idea being that I kind of want the weapons potentially to be your strategies, right? So if you have I guess I have to create a card in here. If you have and I wrote a whole list, but like, for instance, an axe, hand axe, and shield is a strategy, right? So you have chosen this as a strategy. Make it smaller. And it might have 3 different tactics, right? So now you have, for instance, like, I don't know, slamming something, right? Or whatever. So now each different, it's kind of like, I think it was Guild Wars 2 or Guild Wars 1, where each weapon had its own powers that would appear. So same kind of idea. It's like, if I have a card, and this is my hand axe card, it has different strategies than a polearm card, and etc., right? And so those are the abilities, the extra sort of attacks that you have available to you. And what's nice about that is that that is not class specific. So you could have someone who's a sword and board, sword and board rogue, right? If that's what they want to do, because they want access to certain abilities. Now, there might be certain abilities on here that it's like warrior only. Like down here, there's like a warrior only, and there's an extra little something, and that'd be fun. But I don't know if we need cards. I thought it was an interesting thing. For me, the only reason I'm considering this, it's not because Daggerheart had it, it's just because I would hate to have someone constantly erasing like having a space on here that they're constantly erasing depending on what weapons they have. This to me sounds fun, right? And then it also ties in things like this where the tactician has a quick switch ability, and this quick switch ability is change weapon strategies one time free on a turn, where they can just quickly switch out. Whereas other classes, it's like they have to maybe use their tactical action to change what strategy card they have available to them. Okay, so that gives us the combat side. Let's now talk about the social RP side. This is a little different, and let me pull up my notes here so I have them available. And here are the things that I want to add into this. And I don't have I haven't played with this one yet, so bear with me, right? So in essence, we would have the, I'm going to say the Harmon Circle. And what is this? Well, back in the storytelling video, I think it's the third one, I talked about sort of like, it's I don't want to say the hero's journey because I think that has a negative connotation for some people, but in essence, it's the Harmon Circle is this sort of like need, seek, find, you know, these different action verbs that tell a story of sort of how your character's kind of progressing, right? I want to have the faction system. I want to have a rival system. I want to have class specific RP mechanics. I want to have background and skills again on this side, because you need to reference those on both sides. I want to have theory of control, maybe? We'll talk about that in a second. I want to have loss of status or shame history. I want to have ideals, flaws, handicaps, limitations, something to that effect. That goes back to the storytelling with Sanderson's ideas for creating good characters. I might want to have likability, proactivity, and competence somehow woven into this. Those are the different little levers that Sanderson also pulls on his characters. Goal, curiosity, or motivation. So we have a North Star for their character. That's going to be tied sort of into let's move it up here, because it's almost like it's a part of the Harmon Circle, to be honest. And then maybe this idea of strength, order, feelings, and understandings, but I don't know about that yet. I'm still playing around with that idea. So these are some of the things that I envision on this side. It's a lot, right? But I envision something like where you have, in essence, this Harmon Circle thing on the side here, where it's like you have a progression of spaces, and each one of these is like linked downwards, right? And it starts with your, I think Harmon Circle's like need is top, right? Something like that. And then what you would have is that it would be moving along this story here. So it's like, let me see. And of these, I think that oops, sorry. I think that this one, oh, we should do purple because it's a little bit better. And I think that this one, I forget how this works exactly in the story circle, but I think those are ones that are in a state of control, and these are ones that are in a state of chaos, right? And so in essence, these would have blanks in them that the DM and the player would kind of work together on what's the need, and then you would have thematic beats that would then be able to, the character would be looking for opportunities to role play in how these other beats might chain together to eventually, you know, some sort of change in their character happens, right? No idea how that would work out, but in essence, that's the idea, right? Work in progress. And so up here you have name, as always. You would have your background and your skills again. Let's move this over here. Let's move that over here. Right? What else would you have? Then you'd have this faction system. which I'm really interested in, because in essence, what I thought about for this, and let me pull up my notes on this one as well. Okay, so here's the idea, is in essence, you would have something like something to this effect. We're going to take this again, and we're going to copy it, and we're going to move it over here, and we'll change all these colors to yellow, right? And we're going to change the arrows the other direction. Let's do this. Locally known, right? And this would be locally liked, and then this one would be locally loved. And then over here you would have like where, right? So you would have like the location, and you could mark in, depending on your game, what the cities are. And in essence, you would have like dot, whatever, like 3 spots, right? And so you have 3 spots for each of these available. So let's get rid of this, get rid of this. We'll copy and paste it, right? And then we'll spread these down, So now you have this sort of concept of like, here's this. Then up here, you have something like globally known, right? Or whatever you want to call it. And then globally liked. And then globally loved, right? And then this gives you a whole other idea, right? Where it's like another sort of route. And so then what happens, I guess this doesn't matter because this is globally. But then what happens is you have these choice moments where it's like, as you're gaining faction, or as you're affecting this faction, you can either A, add another something here, or move up a rung. And so it's like, I could be locally known by 3 different places, or I could be locally known by 1 place and then locally liked by another place, and etc. Like, or I could never be globally known, but I'm locally loved in 3 different locations, right? And then there might be another thing where it's like, this is one aspect, but then at some point in time, you can choose to instead go locally disliked, right? And then that is a whole other space, right? And so now this is here, etc. And then this is like in the middle, and then this is here, and this is here. And now we move all this, and then we copy this, we put that over here, and we delete this one because it doesn't matter. And now this is like this. And then this one's here. And then this one is locally loathed, right? Or locally hated, or something to that effect, right? And so now we have this interesting, and then globally known, and then we have it's like globally known, and we'll make these sort of happy, right? Oh, this is nice. This is what's a happy? We'll make it purple, royalty, right? I'll make these royal, and then we'll make these all red on this side, right? And so now this is sort of, you know, in essence, what the faction system kind of, and this is globally loathed, which maybe that's the kind of game you want to play, or maybe it's not necessarily the game you want to play. It's just what happens, right? Because it might be a different group or whatever. So now this is sort of like a thing, right? This is a potential thing. I have no idea where this monstrosity is going. What else? That's the faction system. And so let's go ahead and group that up and we'll give that a background of, we'll keep it at, we'll do like some sort of like light teal, right? And we'll call it the faction system. And so that gives us a faction system. That gives us the Harmon circle. I have no idea where else the stuff is going to go on. We have our background, we have our skills. Then we would have things like our character traits. This video is getting a little long, so I think I'm going to stop it here. Because to be honest, these are the main things I've kind of thought about. I haven't fleshed out the other things. The theory of control I haven't fleshed out. The class-specific RP would be something similar to this. So imagine this kind of thing again, but just smaller, because you'd only have like 4 or 3, maybe like 3 abilities each. So maybe you've got something like this again, but it's like half the size, right? Because it's like, this would be an example, for instance, like the tactician would be like very good at diplomacy, right? And the seeker would be very good at tracking, right? This is when that might come into play, right? And then this is sort of the faction slash, when it comes to likability, proactivity, and competence, I think that those ideas start to become embedded in this, because you have likability embedded in here. You have proactivity embedded in here. You have competence actually embedded more on this side and in these abilities and your skills. So I think that the competence, likability, and proactivity is sort of embedded in. So now the biggest thing we would have to have is this sort of like ideals, flaws, handicaps, and limitations that I think are a big part of character, but they can't feel like hot garbage. And what I mean by that is, looking at you, 5e, meaning that it's just like these little boxes you stick up in the top. I think they need to have mechanical relevance. So the question is, I got to figure out what that means to me. So here we go. This is a nice 30-minute video, and I'm going to stop it there. This is the idea behind some of the character sheets so far. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you don't like. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and I'll talk to you guys soon.